The Kiseki series, which is translated as the Trails series in English, heavily builds on shared plot lines and complex political intrigue across many games. So welcome to the final part of this redo summary series of Sky SC's story. We'll be starting right where we left off, with Estelle having been kidnapped by the Society. Now let's dive right in. Estelle has this awful nightmare in which Joshua breaks apart and says goodbye for good. She then awakens in a completely unfamiliar room with Ren staring down at her. A look out the window reveals that she's actually aboard the Society's gigantic air fortress, the Glorious. Estelle is then led to a massive room upstairs, and is greeted by a grandiose pipe organ performance, befitting any big bad. The professor finally imparts his true identity as an Anguis of the Society. He used to be a priest of the Septian Church, and learned some church techniques and special information on artifacts before discarding his faith after a chance meeting with the Grand Master of Ouroboros. Estelle also finally learns the truth of Joshua having been used against his knowledge or will to report to the Society the entire time he lived with her and her father. So beyond furious, she attempts to attack Wiseman, only to be thwarted by Louvet. The other enforcers met previously make their appearance as well, before Wiseman extends an official invitation to Estelle to join their ranks. Later in her room, Estelle actually begins to give it some thought, but that's when Louvet joins her and says she's not suited to join them. She simply has too little darkness in her own heart. Then at last, we finally get to hear the true story of Hamel. Back when the village still existed, Louvet was good friends with young Joshua and his older sister Karen. Louvet dreamed of becoming a bracer and practiced hard each and every day. But one such day, figures dressed in black began slaughtering everyone in the village and spared no one, not even children. Louvet acted as bait to give Karen and Joshua a chance to escape, but the two were ambushed by a soldier waiting at the village outskirts. When he finally caught up with the two of them, he found that Joshua had managed to shoot the man in the throat, though not before Karen had already taken a fatal wound shielding her little brother. In her final moments, she entrusted her beloved harmonica to Joshua and asked Louvet to take care of him. Then she passed with a peaceful look on her face. Seeing how the men who caused such bloodshed were found with Liberlian weaponry, the Empire invaded said kingdom in retaliation. Though as we all know, it'd end in Erebonia's defeat just months later. But it turns out those men weren't Liberlian soldiers at all, but in actuality, were Jaegers hired to carry out the plans of the Empire's Warhawk faction. After the war, the men responsible for the plot were quietly executed, and the entire incident was quickly covered up by both countries' governments. Since Joshua's spirit was completely shattered afterwards, and nothing Louvet did could help, he entrusted Joshua's care to Wiseman when the opportunity arose. Louvet then assures Estelle that she'll be returned to her father when the time comes, but Estelle hatches her own escape plan once the enforcers left. A while later, the Jaegers guarding her room storm in after hearing some glass shattering. Incredulously, it looks like she's broken the window and jumped, but Estelle uses this element of surprise to knock them out in one fell swoop. Then she makes her way through a series of blocked exits, doors, and orbital machines, all completely solo, until she eventually reaches the rooftop deck of the ship. Here she's reunited with Gilbert, of all people, who has managed to join this Jaeger Corps. But then something peculiar happens. Another Jaeger approaches them all. This figure reveals himself to be Joshua, though his and Estelle's surreal first meeting since FC's end is interrupted by Louvet. Joshua and Louvet themselves have an even surrealer moment, since it's been 5 years since they met face to face like this. Joshua wants to know why he still works for the Society, if his debt regarding Joshua has already been fulfilled. But it's not only about that for Luve. Enforcer number 2 wants to put humanity to the test, to see if it's worthy of Karen's death. So seeing how things are not in Joshua's favor, given that his specialty lies in assassination and not in one-on-one duels like this, Luve gives him 3 options: to either surrender together with Estelle, die protecting her, or to leave her here while he himself escapes. Fortunately, Joshua made the preemptive move of tweaking each of the Glorious's many engines. Without someone as capable as Luve to fix the problem, the entire ship would go down soon. So this obviously forces Luve's hand, which gives Joshua and Estelle a chance to get to the aircraft hangar and make off on one of the Society's own airships. They are pursued by some Jaeger patrol ships and begin to take heavy fire, but the Bobcat joins the fray to save the day. You see, the Capuas were actually shadowing the Glorious this whole time, just in case Joshua were to get in trouble. Their actions are truly a surprise to him, and he's simply amazed that they came back to help. In his previous life, the only thing he knew was kill or be killed, take or be taken from. It was only via meeting Estelle and all the others that he's been able to understand the beautiful depth of human relationships. And yet, he still determines it's something someone like him can never truly have. The two touch down on the Goal Seaside Way right outside Rouen, where Joshua prepares to leave Estelle once again, this time urging her to stop chasing after him. But as we've seen, Estelle has grown a lot since Joshua left, and knows that he's lying about his feelings. He may say that he's unable to experience emotions, and how he's only a bad match for Estelle, when the truth is that he's just scared of the potential pain that can come from losing someone close. He's hardly an unemotional puppet, and actually feels too deeply for others to be separated from them forever. So she suggests they make a promise to one another, that they'll protect and stand by each other as equals, and thus opens up the floodgates for Joshua, who allows himself to cry for the first time in his life since his sister's passing. All the while, Estelle just holds him in her arms. Now that they've made up, Estelle returns Joshua's only memento of Karen to him. Then the two get a proper redo of their first kiss. Now, as great as the Capua's timing was when it came to saving their butts, they definitely have the worst timing now, since they touch down right next to the two during this special moment. Touching reunions aside, Joshua can't shake his feelings of dread about the Society. As was shown aboard the Glorious, Ouroboros is a powerful threat, and there's really no telling what will happen next. Chapter 7 begins with Queen Alicia pardoning Joshua for the deeds he took part in while with the Capuas. She and General Morgan also confirm Luve's telling of Hamel from their side. Then all the other playable characters finally arrive, necessitating some touching reunions with Estelle, but especially with Joshua. The good vibes are cut short when Captain Schwartz rushes in with dire news. Dangerous creatures have appeared all throughout the kingdom, and the tetracyclic towers have been enveloped in some ominous abnormality. So we are sent to deal with the towers, while the army and other bracers handle the Jaeger and Archaism attacks on the ground. On top of all this chaos, we lose our best mage Olivier after he reveals he must return to Erebonia now, and therefore won't be able to join us. He's seen chatting with Mueller after we depart, rather ominously musing on how the next time we meet, it will be as foes. At Esmela's tower, we find that the interior of the tower has completely changed. Though according to Kevin, the tower itself isn't what changed. Rather, we were sent to a different area thanks to something he refers to as spatial translocation. Each of these towers' rooftop devices are guarded by one of the first 4 enforcers we've met, the first being Bleblanc. Next, we find Walter at Carnelia Tower. After getting a taste of how Enforcer 8 fights now, Zin can see that Walter has lost the core principle of martial arts. The two engage in their own personal duel, destroying the massive pillars around them with just their bare fists. The whole thing raises more questions than answers though, since it looks like Zin doesn't understand the true reason why their master died. The two begin charging up their Super Saiyan moves, though that's when they're both interrupted by guild receptionist Kilika, much to everyone else's shock. Obviously, she's beyond skilled to make it through the whole tower completely by herself. She's only come with one objective though, and that's to clear things up with Walter. Supposedly her father, remember, the master of the dojo, said something to Walter that has to do with Zin, while the latter demands answers. But Kilika herself claims it actually wasn't about Zin at all, but everything to do with her. The entire tense conversation is cut short when the device on the tower ceases its functioning and the black miasma fades. Walter and Kilika share the same sentiment, that they're glad they got to see each other again, though Kilika concludes that this is probably the final time they'll do so. Now it's up to Walter and Zin to sort out the rest themselves. Next up is Luciola at the Saffrol Tower. It turns out she's actually the one responsible for the death of Mr. Harvey, the beloved leader of their circus troupe, all those years ago. She couldn't forgive him for planning to leave them all, so she pushed him off a cliff with her own two hands. It wasn't until she returned to the troops' camp that night that she fabricated his far-off scream with her illusion magic. This is why she ended up joining the society. She wanted to better understand this darkness inside of her. But before she can say any more, the device on the tower completes its objective. Luciola then promises Shara she'll tell her everything when they next meet, then disappears. Lastly, we are reunited with Ren on top of Ambrel Tower. She forgives Estelle for running away from the Glorious, and in return, Estelle apologizes for refusing the society's offer. Joining them simply wouldn't align with her true self. But Ren doesn't understand and is even angered when Estelle voices her displeasure with Ouroboros and what it's forcing on a young child like her. It actually infuriates her and completely changes her mind about Estelle. But after the resulting fight, Ren shares a fairy tale with us. Apparently, her fake parents gave her away to some other people, and tearfully said they'd return to get her. But the thing is, they never did. In the years following, she was forced to do many unpleasant things with older adults, things that always hurt her. Meanwhile, all the other children in her same position got sick and died. This continued on and on until finally, Louve, Joshua, and some other Ouroboros members killed all those bad adults. Joshua confirms the girl's story and reveals that sometimes Ouroboros will get rid of lesser criminal organizations in order to absorb their resources. Ever since that time, Ren has seen Ouroboros as her real home, with Potter Mater as her real dad and mom rolled into one. Then she calls down said giant archaism to crush us. We struggle to fend it off, but right before Ren can have it annihilate Estelle, the black miasma surrounding the tower dissipates, so she swears to butcher us all the next time we meet, before heading back to the Glorious on Potter Mater. All these revelations really have Estelle doubting herself that night. Perhaps she is too naive and sheltered to help someone like Ren. But Joshua thinks otherwise. He knows Ren is a natural-born genius, as well as a strong spirit who's able to overcome any adversity. The things she's faced are just as dark, if not further entrenched in the abyss of human cruelty, as what he faced in Hamel. And yet, she did not break like he did. So, according to her reaction today, Estelle's words probably reached a part of Ren that even she currently doesn't recognize. This perks Estelle right back up, though the moment is shattered when Professor Russell barges into the command room. The Capel has finally finished analyzing the data crystals we found earlier in the towers, and right as he's about to explain the true relation between the towers and the Gospels, Wiseman himself gets to do so for him. Hacking into the Arcee's comm system has posed no problem for him, clearly. Wiseman confirms Russell's findings that the Gospels are conduits of the Oriole's abilities, but he's taken the liberty of contacting us for far more than that. He wanted to let us know of the coming moment of glory, and suggests we get to the ship's foredeck for the best view. So everyone rushes onto the deck just in time to witness the truly magnificent reveal of the Oriole, a gleaming, floating city that materializes right in the night sky. Yet, all the professor can think about is the orbital shutdown phenomenon and demands Captain Schwartz to land the ship before it's too late. Turns out he was right, since the Oriole proceeds to wipe out all orbital power throughout the entirety of Liberal. Meanwhile, Wiseman and the Enforcers look on, savoring the fruits of their labor. The Anguis thanks them all for making this success possible, and for bringing them ever closer to the plan's final stage. Thus ends Chapter 7. In the aftermath of the orbital shutdown, the entire kingdom has been thrown into disarray. Army patrol ships can no longer make their rounds, the bridge in Rouen can no longer be lowered, and the high-tech city of Zeiss has completely stalled. All mass transportation has been grounded, which has dealt a devastating blow to trade and business. The good news is that Cassius's foresight back in Chapter 5 had prompted Professor Russell's development of something he calls a zero-field generator. This term hits different after playing Crossbell, by the way. This device can stop the interference of the Oriole within a very small radius, but given the professor's limited amount of time, he was only able to prepare 16 of these prior to this incident. He entrusts 10 of the devices to Captain Schwartz and the army, while the remaining 6 are given to us to get the guild branches up and running again. Chloe and Kevin take care of Gransel's branch, considering they need to speak with the Queen and the Archbishop anyway, leaving it up to Estelle and the rest to travel across Liberal on foot to reach the remaining regions. Our party members can use the spare zero-field generators to power orbments while traveling from city to city, but with each new guild branch restored, one less orbment can be used by the player. Then we head back to Gransel once that's all done. In the meantime, LeBlanc, Walter, Luciola, and Ren arrive right outside the city's entrance. A military squadron attempts to stop them from proceeding any further, but they're no match for the Enforcers' might. Then they send the Society's Archaisms and hired Jaegers to take each block of Gransel, while the Enforcers take the palace. We are greeted by the terrible sight of all these wiped out soldiers right at the outskirts, while the situation inside the city is no better, with everything now up in flames. Elnan runs over to us with instructions to focus on the castle, since the army will take care of the rest of the city. Meanwhile, the Enforcers have already reached the entrance to the castle. Walter, with only his bare fist, brings down the first set of doors with ease. Duke Doonan urges the Queen and Chloe to prioritize their own safety, which deeply impresses Butler Philip, as you know, considering how the Duke was like before. But he is ultimately unable to savor the moment since the Enforcers have brought down the second set of doors. As a former captain of the Royal Guard, Philip leaps from the second-floor balcony and confronts the Society head-on. But by the time we arrive, the entire station of Royal Guards has been wiped out, while an exhausted Philip urges us to hurry towards the Queen's royal chambers. Unfortunately, the Enforcers have already secured the 2 royals, and the odds are completely against us, since even without these valuable hostages shielding them, we'd likely never have had a chance to take on all 4 of these Enforcers at once anyway. But somehow, Cassius's protégés show up to save the day. Lieutenant Colonel Sid distracts the others just long enough to allow Sieg and Richard to rescue the Queen and Chloe. The liberation of the city is also underway via former Intelligence Division soldiers led by Amalthea, and fortunately for Niall and Dorothy, they happen to be in the perfect spot to document this incredible turn of events. But the rescue of the royals are of no consequence to the enforcers, since this was actually just an optional mission from them from Wiseman. LeBlanc warns us to be on guard for the next trial though, one that's already approaching. Then the four disappear. Anyway, back in the throne room, we're made privy to Cassius's 5D chess play. You see, he was expecting Wiseman to advance on the capital city, especially since most of the soldiers would have had trouble fighting without their orbital rifles. So he secured the aid of the former Intelligence Division soldiers, all whom are skilled in hand-to-hand combat. Queen Alicia preemptively approved of this plan and granted them all temporary release from prison. There's big news on Chloe's end too. She just went through the inheritance ceremony this morning and is now the official crowned heir of Liberl. She asks for all of our support in the future since she's still young and inexperienced. Seeing this, Richard makes a soft aside to Sid about what a fool he's been worrying about the country's future when so many incredible young people exist. But Queen Alicia and Sid correct him, saying that he still has a role to play in Liberl's future as well. But that's when a soldier rushes in with word from the Hawken Gate. The Erebonian army is mobilizing right outside Liberl's border in spite of the current orbital shutdown, thanks to tanks running on old-fashioned steam power. Now, the only way the Erebonians could have prepared these in advance is if they had prior intel that Liberl would be facing this kind of situation, clearly demonstrating that Imperial leadership must have some sort of tie to Ouroboros. So Chloe boldly asks her grandmother to send her to the border as representative of Liberl, while we take along as her escorts. Even though bracers are normally prohibited from directly interfering in a country's politics, they can serve as a neutral third party in international negotiations. General Morgan addresses Lieutenant General Vander and his whole platoon of tanks right outside the Hawken Gate. He accuses Erebonia of reneging on the Non-Aggression Pact, which, remember, was only signed a few months prior. But General Vander counters, stating that the southernmost Erebonians are without orbital power. He continues that what seems like an imperial show of force is actually some well-intentioned aid that they'd like to bestow upon us fellow allies of the Non-Aggression Pact. The imperial government is aware of an outside society's actions within Liberl and only wishes to help us keep the peace during such a crisis situation. This is obviously nonsense though, since there's no feasible reason why any tank in this current era would run on steam and combustion. It's at this moment that Chloe and her entourage finally arrive. She thanks General Morgan for what he's done so far, then introduces herself formally to General Vander as the Crown Princess of Liberl, Claudia von Auslese. She understands that the Erebonian citizens must be terrified without their orbital power, but she asks General Vander to please consider how frightened his Liberalian allies would feel if foreign troops were to enter their country. Furthermore, Liberl's military has successfully dealt with many of the society's actions, and is already investigating the phenomena above Valeria Lake. But that's when a dissenting voice cuts in. The princess's words may sound pretty, but they ultimately offer no tangible assurance to Erebonia. Now, to everyone's complete shock, the man who has just entered these tense negotiations is none other than the bard we've been traveling with for so long. Or more like the Imperial Prince, Olivert Reze Arnor. Apparently, Chloe recognizes the name, but can't recall ever seeing the face among the Imperial nobility. Prince Olivert finds this unsurprising, considering he's the bastard child of Erebonia's emperor. And so it turns out it was actually Olivier whom Richard was preparing to betroth Chloe to last game. Olivert continues, informing us of the rumors spreading across the Empire as we speak. that the floating structure above Liberal is actually a groundbreaking technological advancement that was built in retaliation for Erebonia's invasion 10 years ago. Chloe needs time to muster a rebuttal to this, so an enraged Estelle does so in her stead. Her position as a B-rank bracer affords her the right to enter this international negotiation as a neutral party. She swears upon the bracer emblem that the floating structure is not a hostile military weapon, and even extends an offer to forward the military and Bracer Guild's records of the Society's incidents as proof of Liberal's goodwill. Now, Prince Olivert does acknowledge that the Bracer Guild's words carry weight, considering their good reputation across the continent. Yet, she still provided no tangible evidence that Liberal and the Bracer Guild have the resources to put an end to this serious crisis. So Princess Claudia makes a final proposal, and asks the Empire to allow Liberal a certain amount of time to handle the situation on their own. At last, this appears to appease Prince Olivert, and as if right on cue, the Arcee touches down on the plains, allowing Brigadier General Cassius Bright to address everyone present. The very fact that the royal flagship just demonstrated flight capability should be sufficient evidence on its own that Liberal has the ability to deal with the floating structure. Cassius and the prince then share a light-hearted laugh. Ah, so they were in cahoots all along. And so, Olivert states he will keep his word, then orders all the Erebonian troops to withdraw. He also decides to board the Arcee himself to ensure, for Erebonia's sake, that the crisis is properly seen to. All the while, General Vander is astounded that Olivert made his first public appearance in ages on such a center stage as this. And he's even more surprised that his nephew, Mueller, allowed it to happen. Olivier says he simply can't allow something as terrible as the Hommel conspiracy to happen again. You see, these steam-powered tanks must be Chancellor Osborne's doing, meaning he must be in contact with the Society. And so, Olivier promises to do all in his power to bring this giant within Erebonia's military and politics down. With that said, the party finally catches up to give Ollie a piece of their own mind. There's some additional stuff to discuss as well, starting with how Kevin will be tagging along with us. Apparently, the church knows what the Aureole actually is. It's probably not the entire floating city itself, but an artifact located somewhere within it. One which probably supplies the massive structure its power. Cassius will be staying on the ground in Liberal, so he hands Joshua a letter before our entire group boards and takes off for the floating city. We find that Niall and Dorothy have also been invited again as per the Queen's request. But unfortunately our journey is anything but smooth sailing. The Glorious is more than a match when it comes to firepower, though thankfully the Arcee's size and speed is able to outmaneuver the giant air fortress. We eventually break through the clouds and are treated to our first and truly magnificent view of the floating city. But Louvet thwarts our landing when he swoops in atop a high-tech archaism and takes out a vital component of our ship, sending us plummeting. It's by the sheer grace of Adios that we manage to escape certain death, coming to a stop right at the very edge of the floating city. Once we've all had a chance to catch our breath, it's decided that a small party will investigate the Liber Arc's central tower, which will allow the rest of the crew to focus on repairing the ship. The good news is that all our orbments work on this island, since the Aureole only neutralizes those it deems foreign. So by making it onto the floating city, our tech is no longer thought of as such. Before the scouting team leaves, Joshua and Kevin step aside to discuss something, just the two of them. The former rather uncharacteristically pleads with the latter that he's the only one who can help him out. The two then head to the medical bay to take care of something before returning to the other party members. We proceed to navigate through all these ancient tunnels, populated by a huge variety of strange monsters, and finally reach what looks like a residential district. Here we happen to find Josette right as she's surrounded by society archaisms. So we give her a hand with the machines, then ask why she's all alone out here. It turns out the Bobcat was in the air above the Liber Arc when the orbital shutdown happened, and ended up crash landing here. They were working on repairs when she noticed a strange archaism flying around and shot it down. This unfortunately alerted the Society's Jaegers, who then showed up and took her brothers and the entire rest of the crew. Now, despite their shaky relationship, Estelle reassures Josette that we'll find her brothers, then invites her to join the Arceus crew for the time being. The scouting team resumes exploration and eventually resurfaces in what looks like an industrial district. We see that the Glorious is docked here, and overhear that the Enforcers are currently away, meaning that now is our best chance to rescue the Sky Bandits. Turns out, none of the regular barriers are up, so we're able to find the captured Capuas easily, though the almighty, or more like wimpy, Gilbert attempts to stop us, but we take him and the archaism he summons down, then continue to successfully free the Capuas with the card key we found. With that done, now we can focus on our main objective, scouting out the central axis pillar. The first enforcer to bar our way up the tower is LeBlanc. He finds himself in the need to leave after we successfully crack his mask. Then the next enforcer up is Walter, who finally reveals all the info he withheld from our last meeting. It turns out that their master believed that Zin was actually better in pure talent and quality, and since Kilika's father was going to have the most talented student inherit the dojo, this would mean that Zin should have been the one betrothed to Kilika instead. Now Zin is blindsided by the news and attempts to place Walter further on a pedestal again, but the enforcer continues. There was simply no way that he nor Kilika could personally accept being together if Zin was the actual successor of the dojo. But Zin has some hidden truth to reveal of his own. Their master had actually been diagnosed with terminal cancer back then, and wished to end his life in battle with his greatest student. Now that everything's been aired out, Zin places all he's learned from the Bracer Way into his fist, while Walter places all he's learned from the Society into his own. Then they launch their final strikes at each other, with Zin ultimately emerging victorious. The next enforcer we face is Luciola. The real reason Mr. Harvey wished to step down as troop leader was actually quite tragic. You see, it was common for other circus acts to engage in nefarious deals and sleazy lines of work in order to supplement their show's income. But Mr. Harvey refused to force his workers to engage in such practices. Instead, he had racked up an exorbitant amount of personal debt just to keep their circus running. But when those personal debts became due, he began planning towards leaving the troupe in order to save the other members from being associated with him. Moments after he broke the news to Luciola, she confessed her love to him, but to no avail, since this whole time, Mr. Harvey had only seen her as a daughter. So she decided to kill him, right then and there, so that he'd remain hers forever. With her piece said, the enforcer then jumps from the tower, though Shara manages to snag her arm with her whip. In Luciola's final words to Shara, she admits she's never regretted killing Harvey, but what she does hold some regret over is leaving Shara behind. Then she severs the whip and plummets to the vast earth below. After all of that, the young Ren is up next. She demands Estelle take back what she said about the society, but the Bright refuses to budge on this, telling Ren that the world doesn't just revolve around her. Unsurprisingly, the young enforcer calls down the full might of Potter Mater to finish what was started last time. But it only ends with a distraught young girl when we best Potter Mater. So Ren demands we just leave, since we don't understand a thing about her. This is when Estelle literally slaps some sense into her, prompting Ren to accuse Estelle of being no different than the adults who abused her. But Estelle just hugs Ren in response. She only asks the younger girl to follow the answer lying within her own heart. If Ren really does think she's just the same as all those other adults, then so be it. She just wants Ren to be true to herself. This is obviously a lot to take in for her, but the young girl seems to have some kind of budding change of heart. She exclaims she won't forgive us if we die in the trials still remaining, before once again taking off on Potter Mater. Then at last we continue on to the rooftop to face the Blade Lord himself. It's time for Joshua to show Luve the strength of his own convictions, ones which have led him to ditch the society for Estelle and his newfound friends instead. As for Luve, seeing Joshua stand on his own 2 feet means his promise to Karen has now been fulfilled. There's no need for him to hold back any longer. Our tough initial battle bleeds into a one-on-one challenge between Joshua and Luve alone. The former enforcer does well at first, though is soon placed on the defensive. With his blades locked against Luve's, Joshua finally asks what he meant when he said he wished to bring the world to trial. We learn that Enforcer number 2 needs to see if humanity can answer for its failings. Across the vast span of time, humankind has inflicted countless wounds upon itself, the terrible tragedies forgotten over the decades and centuries. Even the places which seem like perfect utopias, such as this floating Liber Arc, only appear as such because people have deluded themselves from true reality. Ultimately, the good never lasts, and the ancient citizens of the Aureole will return to Earth. Similarly, Luve wishes to strip our modern society of such luxuries, so that we'll be forced to confront the truth. But Joshua responds that Luve is the one who's delusional, that he must have realized that there are those out there who truly do good. Even his sister Karen selflessly gave her life to save his own, which has then allowed him the opportunity to find Estelle and so many others. It's in Luve's brief moment of absolute shock that Joshua launches his best attack and successfully disarms him. Now that his question about human nature has been answered, Luve no longer has any reason to work with Ouroboros. Then the now 2 former enforcers share a very touching moment of true reunion. Luve then thanks Estelle for reaching out to Ren, Joshua, and now himself, not to mention so many others. He's also noticed that Agate has real conviction behind his blade now compared to the first time they crossed swords. And finally, some foreshadowing to the next game is revealed when Luve asks if Kevin knows a person named Rufina. Apparently, she was so skilled she was able to fight toe-to-toe with Luve himself, but we learn she unfortunately died in an accident 4 years prior. Then Wiseman appears out of nowhere and deals a severe blow to Luve. The Anguis then activates what's called a stigma in Joshua, which allows him to seize complete control over him. Wiseman then taunts Kevin, knowing that a member of the Gralsritter like him would know the implications of all this. Then he teleports with Joshua to the core sector where the Aureole lies. Now, thankfully, the rest of our friends arrive just in the nick of time to fend off the massive archaisms trying to block our way. Once we've caught up with Wiseman, he finally reveals what truly happened to the ancient peoples living here 1200 years ago. As we all know by now, humanity was given 7 divine treasures back then, each one capable of granting miracles in its own way. But this unfortunately fractured society into factions, each one in pursuit of their corresponding sectarian's ideal. As for the Aureole, they had the power to bestow any wish mankind could possibly want via each individual's gospel. People lived in paradise on the Liber Arc, free from suffering. But in exchange for these miracles, the people slowly gave in to the artificial bliss bestowed by the Aureole. As a result, the people lost their sense of purpose, drive, and ethics, all of which gave rise to madness and despair. Birth rates dropped and suicide ran rampant, prompting Chloe's ancestor Celeste and the other rebels to work tirelessly to seal the aureole away. Weisman states that because of all this, mankind was forced to suffer through the Dark Ages on Zemuria's surface. Even now, mankind destroys itself over petty conflicts, but they can overcome that with this new, proposed path, an enlightened one where the human species is perfectly rational and free from the influence of crude emotion. But Estelle's heard enough, calling such plans pure nonsense. Humanity isn't helpless. So many people all across the world have been extending a hand to their fellow man throughout this entire crisis. Without emotion, there would be no bonds, and therefore no point to living together as mankind. So in response, Weisman challenges Estelle to prove that bonds between people can overcome his own scathing view of humanity. The Anguis then paralyzes the other two in our party with this creepy-looking eye technique, then commands Joshua to seize Estelle and kill her. You see, the sadistic Weisman sees Joshua as the true final test for mankind. Once Joshua slays Estelle, the Anguis will then break the hypnosis to see his creation's reaction. The boy's heart will shatter again and allow him to construct a completely new human personality once again. As for Estelle, even with Joshua's blades poised to take her own life, all she can think of is his well-being. She apologizes that she won't be able to keep her end of their promise, and urges him never to run from reality again, even if she is to die here. But shockingly, Joshua turns on Weisman and attacks him instead. It turns out that long before this final encounter, Joshua was already growing increasingly worried about the stigma Weisman planted within him. So with the help of Father Graham, a hypnotic wedge was placed between his conscious and the stigma, so that if he ever was commanded to kill Estelle, the increased pressure placed on the stigma would cause it to shatter. Joshua bet it all on Weisman's cruelty and how he'd be commanded to do the one thing he feared most. And once again, Cassius Bright came in clutch, having indirectly prevented this mess after advising Joshua to seek Kevin's help. In the events that follow, Weisman eventually fuses with the aureole, and together they become this grotesque-looking monster that's able to form an absolute barrier, capable of reflecting all of our physical attacks and orbital arts. But just when all hope seems lost, Luve arrives to help, though first he must confirm this nagging suspicion he's had for a long time, that being Weisman's involvement in the Hommel plot. Seeing how the professor has consistently demonstrated time and time again how he only approaches people in their moments of weakness. With that said, Luve brings his mighty blade down and actually manages to crack Weisman's barrier. Only this sword is able to do so, since the Kernviter was forged by the divergent laws of the Grandmaster herself. But Luve pays dearly for standing against a Septarian-fused Anguis and is fatally knocked back, so it's up to us to finish the job. Weisman attempts to access the true power of the aureole, but it's at this moment that the Anguis appears to lose control of it all. The Septarian begins acting of its own accord, as a grotesque snake-like figure attaches itself to the aureole, Weisman simply screaming the entire process. Now this final stretch is tough, but we ultimately come out victorious. This greatly confuses the professor, who can't understand why the Septarian had disappeared. He teleports away, meaning we finally get the opportunity to assess Luve's condition. Tragically, he and Joshua must exchange their final words with each other. He urges Joshua not to die protecting what's important to him, but rather to live for it instead. He also asks Estelle one last favor, to always keep protecting his little brother. Then he whispers that he finally understands why Karen was able to die with a smile on her face, before breathing his last. The others hurry out as the ground begins to shake, eventually leaving Joshua and Estelle all alone. Obviously devastated, Joshua tells her to go on while making no indication he'll follow, meaning Estelle's forced to slap some sense into him. Didn't he just hear Louve? They have to keep the promises they made to him. And so, Joshua grabs Louve's blade and wishes him and Karen peace before he turns to leave with Estelle. Now somewhere else in the tower, a wounded Wiseman is actually worried for once, and is pondering if this entire Oriole situation was actually just some grand test for him from the Grand Master. Surprisingly, Kevin shows up and approaches the dangerous Anguis all on his own. He easily dispels Wiseman's evil eye technique, meaning Kevin was no Gralsritter newcomer at all, but a veteran this entire time. He claims he's actually their number 5, then displays a sudden form of cruelty that he's never shown at any other point in the game. His true mission this whole time was to send a filthy apostate of the church like Wiseman to Gehenna. He then launches a stake from his bowgun, as an absolutely bewildered Anguis just can't believe the church would allow him to use something carved from the salt pillar itself. His last words call Kevin a damned dog before his whole body crystallizes into salt. Kevin mumbles to himself that Joshua is lucky to have been able to escape this kind of life. Right as Campanella appears, the Enforcer is glad to confirm the rumors for himself, that the 5th Dominion, the one who's called the Heretic Hunter, is just as cold as they say. Then with just a snap of his fingers, Campanella erases Wiseman himself, then teleports away with the now deceased Anguis's staff. With that, Kevin makes his way back to the others as they're seen making their escape. Now at some point, Joshua falls to his knees, prompting Estelle to stop as well. Kevin notices and rushes back to let Joshua know he's not going to be feeling well for a while, since he forcibly ripped his stigma out. They resume their escape, though Joshua suddenly shoves Estelle back as a giant part of the tunnel takes out the entire path. The two tell the others to go on ahead, even as Shara yells she couldn't bear to face Cassius if she left them behind. Some others mention seeing other tunnels along the way, suggesting there must be another path out, so the two groups wish each other well before splitting off. Estelle and Joshua continue through tunnel after tunnel and finally are able to reach the surface, though they soon find out they've come across the worst case scenario when their path forward and the path backwards crumble before them. Joshua apologizes to Estelle for getting them into the situation, but Estelle won't have any of it. Not now. In fact, she tells him that despite their hopeless circumstance, she feels no fear. Then, as a final request, she asks him to hold her, before the column plummets and launches the embracing duo into a free fall. All the while, the once magnificent city crumbles, the debris crashing into the ocean below as the Arce and the Bobcat race away from the site. It really begins to hit them that Estelle and Joshua never made it back on board. Everyone falls silent in despair, but that's when Dorothy notices Sieg flying through the skies, looking very happy. Then Ragnar breaks through the clouds with Cassius, Estelle, and Joshua on his back. It turns out Cassius just happened to have the foresight to ask his old friend for a favor. Back when we first met Ragnar, he told us that he couldn't get involved with the Oriole directly until a true answer was given by the Septarian. And now that that's happened, his contract has been fulfilled, meaning he's now free to help Joshua and Estelle in their time of need. The dragon finally catches up with the Arce and the Bobcat, allowing Estelle and Joshua to show everyone they're safe and sound. Now, in a final epilogue scene, Joshua greets Karen as he lays Louve's sword down next to her grave. With this, the two truly can be together forever. Estelle then introduces herself to Karen for the first time and gets a little embarrassed over admitting she's officially Joshua's girlfriend. After some lighthearted teasing, The topic turns more serious once Estelle says she wants to find Ren if they can. Trails in the Sky SC then ends with a portrait of Estelle and Joshua holding hands, promising that, no matter where the path takes them next, they'll walk it together. And that's it, guys. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this Sky SC summary redo. Also, come join our welcoming Discord community at discord.gg/LadyVirgilia, and also follow me on Twitter and on Twitch. Get 10% off Rogue Energy products with my code LadyV, and lastly, I want to thank all my wonderful patrons for their support, especially Jared Breland, Andreas Hansen, Captain Hobo, Big Clingy, Sam Bezjak, Francesco Santoyo Rego, Silverwind847, M. Meownalin, Gigi Sora, Platinum Rose, Malcolm Lowry, Killer Ninja 151, Melanie Gutierrez, Unholy Biscuit, Leviathan 8685, Eden Korsef, and Scarmillion. Thanks for watching, guys.